Thank you, Jason. And thank you, Per, for that phenomenal introduction to what I'm going to talk about. Appreciate it. We'll talk afterwards. There really is so much. I think some of what we just saw from Per, the future is now. And there are many race courses that are starting to do this and starting to integrate data in a better fashion. And I think we're certainly going to get into that. And fortunately, he covered most of my first slide, which is that sporting production has changed. It's very obvious to both adjudicating sport and to presenting it. And the types of technologies that have been involved with this are numerous, and really no sport is exempt from it. We heard the mention of baseball and American football, which I think have really been on the bleeding edge of new data in sport. And where racing fits into this is something that I'm going to get into through the course of my time. Trakus has been around and involved in racing dating to 2006. Started tracking races at Woodbine, went to Keeneland, Del Mar after that, international expansion into Turkey soon afterwards. And really the bottom line of what we do is we enable you immediately upon installation to be able to follow your horses as the race is going on. This is a screenshot of last year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. There were 12 horses in this race. Contrary to what the screen may show you otherwise, you can very clearly see number 12, very clearly see number 6. Golden Sense and Broadway Empire, those two horses. Golden Sense actually leads this race from start to finish, but that really only matters to you if Golden Sense was the only horse you bet on, or if you didn't bet in any of the exotic wagering pools, because the second place finisher is number 2, way off the pace. Without those graphics at the bottom of the screen, without a very clear presentation of the silks, how are you possibly going to find number 2 Golden Ticket in that shot? It's nearly impossible without it. So Trakus is on the thoroughbred, it's on the standardbred side as well. And our most recent addition to our product was Saratoga Racecourse in New York. And for those that don't know, and if you've never been there, I highly recommend to visit, Saratoga is the oldest racing, it's really the oldest sporting ground in America. Opened in 1864. They have been racing under rules there longer than anywhere in the United States. And Trakus was installed this year for the first time, their 151st season of racing. And we had an opportunity to go up and get some thoughts from race fans. Truly a wide section of what people thought about Trakus, some of whom were seeing it for the first time, some of whom were coming to the races for the first time, some of whom were ex-trainers, longtime racing fans, and the young set. We interviewed a 14-year-old girl. She's the second person we interviewed, and I assure you we did not pay her to say what she said, nor did we pay anybody here. The response was phenomenal, and I wanted to share that with you right now before moving on. Yep. Here it comes. They may have been aided by a couple cocktails too there. Trakus, the success and the viewer feedback is undeniable, and the service has obviously grown. These are just some of the racetrack partners that we have right now, and we've gotten to the point where in North America, 55% of every bet that is made, 55% of all the turnover is made on a race that has Trakus, where people can follow their horses. And with the addition of the Hong Kong Jockey Club last year, to our portfolio, we're now up to about 18% of global turnover is on a race that has Trakus. So the basic foundation of the technology is there and is known. On the back end, though, while you can turn this on day one and impact everyone by now being able to see your race, understand where all the horses are, it's the data on the back end that I think has really the long-term implication that will affect more. It certainly goes to the customer segmentation discussion that we had this morning. This is after last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and this information appears on the graphics of many of the race courses. Each race course determines what their own little design is, how things appear on screen and not. And here we have the fifth place finisher who covered 57 feet more than the winner, number 4, New Year's Day. Now, while beaten only 3.5 lengths, covering 57 feet suggested this horse ran about 7 lengths more than the winner. Beaten 3.5, covered about 7 lengths more. This is a story that bettors can take away from each race. The data is made available on websites, and there are some new uses for this data, and I'll get into that momentarily. Overall, advanced data in sport is bigger than it has ever been. I think Per got to that very well, Emmanuel as well. I think in presenting where the rest of sport is going, what people are talking about in terms of the future of data. Well, what I'm going to show you here is what I essentially consider the newborns of statistics. These are stats that did not exist 10 years ago. Some of them didn't exist 5 years ago. You pick the sport, find a statistic that didn't exist several years ago, and now they exist. Ways in which general managers, team operators, owners select players for their team. The way in which bettors use this information to determine where they're going to make a bet, how they're going to bet, and also outside of the realm of what we would consider traditional punting. Don't forget that there is a significant marketplace now in the fantasy world. Fantasy sports contests are really growing and supplanting traditional punting, and it is also happening in racing as well. These sports are providing a way to kind of circumvent the traditional tote pool in some sports or traditional bookmakers, so much to the point that the leading website in America, FanDuel.com, estimates that they will give away roughly $1 billion in prizes next year. $1 billion to players who pay a fee to try and pick, so to speak, the best team. How are they picking their players? How are they choosing to participate? By identifying those that have, in their estimation, above average statistics in certain categories, some statistics that literally have just been created. Where is racing in this platform? It's been fairly slow to react. We've gotten the results down pretty well, the basic data of racing, who won, who finished second, who finished third, what was the margin. We have that down. But where are we in terms of the human element? That's what I really want to get into. It's taken us a while, 8 years of tracking data. Trakus has tracked about 60,000 races since coming into the marketplace. But now we're starting to get to a point where the data that we have can be used to create additional statistics, to reach that advanced player, and even to reach the horseman as well. Some of this is being done on the trainer side. This is Todd Pletcher, the most successful trainer in the United States, with career earnings in excess of $250 million. His credentials are well known. But I was at Saratoga this summer and sitting down to bet a race. It was a maiden race for 2-year-olds, most of whom were first-time starters. And using a product that is available through the Daily Racing Form, a product known as Formulator, I decided to kind of dive into the race and look for something. I was curious. There was a horse named Miss Always Ready. First-time starter. She by more than ready out of a very accomplished dam. It was a field of 10. They were running 1 mile and a 16th on turf. Miss Always Ready was the 2-to-1 favorite in this race, and she was debuting with blinkers on. And something one of the on-air personalities at Saratoga said caught my attention about 15 minutes before the race, and that was she couldn't recall many times when Todd Pletcher trainees debuted with blinkers. So using the Racing Forms product, I went in and searched. It took me about 3 or 4 minutes to get this information. 2-year-old first-time starters, Todd Pletcher in the last 5 years was a 28% trainer. Horses running over 1 mile or more, an 18% strike rate. First-time starters with blinkers. Remember, this is a man with over 1,000 stake wins. He has only started 35 horses with blinkers in their first visit to the race course, winning 10 of them 29% of the time. But how was he with first-time starters wearing blinkers on grass? 0 for 8. 0 for 8. This has absolutely nothing to do with the horse. But I put a line immediately through. 0 for 8, the average beaten margin was 11.5 lengths. Miss Always Ready, she finished 9th at 2-to-1. I made a wagering decision off of very qualified advanced information that had absolutely nothing to do with the horse that was running. It had everything to do with the person who was training the horse. The US, I think, has done a better job of providing this information in this premium product that the racing form has put out. But what about the most important participant in the race other than the horse? There's something to be said for the fact that if the jockey-horse partnership is no longer intact, that the result doesn't count. What about the jockeys? What about the drivers? So some questions to consider. Can racing gain more fans, more interest, and thereby more turnover if we focus more on the human participants? People relate to people. Could we integrate more intricate data to understand jockey and driver performance? We're talking about getting beyond how many times a jockey has won or finished second or finished third or how well they've done with a particular trainer. But we want to know how they're actually doing, how they are performing. Because frankly, we don't have that data now. There is no product. These are athletes, finely tuned and trained, and we don't have data on how they actually perform outside of some very basic statistics. So we decided to create some, the jockey efficiency ratings and the driver efficiency ratings. Through a study conducted on races at Woodbine, Thoroughbreds, 994 races over 3.5 years. We took every race at 8.5 furlongs, about 1,710 meters. Over 8,200 individual horses studied in this sample. And what we first wanted to uncover is, what is the impact of draw? How does draw impact final performance? So from the top down, gate 1 down through stall 14, how many meters on average did each horse cover? And it should be no surprise that the horses drawn on the inside covered the shortest trip, and as you went up or out, those horses would cover wider trips. So the suggestion here is that if you were drawn in stall 12, on average, your horse covered 15.4 meters more than horses drawn in stall 1. That's a difference of about 6 lengths. What's the handicap of being drawn in gate 12 at Woodbine going 8.5 furlongs? That the handicap's about 6 lengths. This basic information is valuable in its own right, and we are starting to publicize it and market it more, and I'll get more to that in a minute. Each jockey performance, however, can now be compared to these long-term averages. How well do the jockeys do relative to the averages that we understand? Let's take an example of a particular horse that started from gate 5, where the average is 1,735.7 meters. If a jockey started from that gate with its mount, covered 1,740.7 meters, then that jockey's mount is assigned a rating of 5, meaning it covered 5 meters more than the average. All of this data being tracked by the devices that we put in the saddle towels on course. So then we take a look at the jockeys themselves. What tendencies can we find? What can we learn? Over these 994 races at Woodbine, 7 jockeys accounted for 63% of all the wins. Up at the top, Eureka da Silva, the most efficient jockey. He was saving 2.2 meters per race. At the bottom, Patrick Husbands, 2.69. A legend, really, in Canadian race riding, a future Hall of Famer if he isn't already. But don't ask him to save ground, because he just doesn't do it. If we look at a wider picture of jockeys, 14 of them accounted for 82% of all the wins. And from the top, Gary Boulanger, the most accomplished rider when it comes to saving ground, winning at roughly a 15% rate from the study. Down at the bottom, 2 of the most accomplished jockeys, Luis Contreras and Patrick Husbands. Notice they had 170 wins and 101 wins each. Think, is wider better? Or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy that horses that are kept wider are better simply because maybe Contreras and Husbands are on the best horses? Notice the average odds on their mounts, 3.9 and 5.1 to 1. So what do we learn from this? The 2 winningest jockeys are the widest riders, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're the best riders. We know that they are on the best horses. The second jockey in the list here, Eureka da Silva, has 86 wins. Go down to the bottom, Emma Jane Wilson also has 86 wins. If the inside is always bad, why does one of the most ground-saving jockeys in this colony have 86 wins? He's good for saving 2.2 meters per race. What else we learned is that if you were to pick one jockey over another, Gary Boulanger, the most ground-saving rider, compared to the most ground-covering rider, that decision alone on average was worth 2.5 lengths. one jockey would save you roughly 2.5 lengths. Not only could this information impact horsemen, but if Gary Boulanger is on quote-unquote my horse, and he's drawn in gate 12, and I think he's going to need to save ground in order to win, would I be more likely to back that horse because Gary Boulanger was aboard? Or if Patrick Husband's aboard, would I expect that there was any ground saving? Probably not. Punters can now quantify performance and the tendencies of riders beyond what we would consider long-standing metrics. This information is available on Woodbine's website. It's available through the America's Best Racing platform. We provide the information on Twitter as well. The thoroughbred community is not alone in this. On the standardbred side, we installed our technology at Hoosier Park last September. And we took the first 1,360 races we tracked there. Fortunately, they're all at 1 mile. It makes it fairly easy, over 12,000 horses. Hoosier provides this information, which drivers save the most ground, which cover the most, and leave it to the punter to make some decisions. There is some additional work that is done on the side of Hoosier. The driver efficiency ratings are provided on their website, provided in the daily race card on site. It's integrated with the analysts and their tipsters, talked about on their broadcast, and it is worth noting that for the second consecutive year, turnover at Hoosier Park is up. Their export signal right now is up 8% for the year in a marketplace in North America where most tracks are happy to either be staying flat or some are seeing declines, but Hoosier is up 8%. I know it's a dangerous ballgame to get in to compare one factor with another in this sport, but it certainly hasn't hurt that their installation of Trakus, and since then that they've experienced an increase in turnover. So the foundational elements are there. It's really up to us to see how it is that we can start integrating this. The average consumer is expecting that sport overall is going to tap into the data mine. Trakus is just beginning to do it. The rest of the sport world has done it. So where are we? Can we engage our customers with these new statistics? Can we find ways to take the mine of data that we have and extract it and use it to our benefit? And not just the benefit of the industry as a whole, but the benefit of the punters. They've come to expect it elsewhere. They certainly should expect it from us now and in the future. Thank you.